Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a core concept that's honestly gonna completely flip how you look at the world, and that's microeconomics. A lot of people think it's just abstract math or confusing charts, but it's actually this incredibly practical toolkit for understanding human behavior and the choices you and I make every single day. To really wrap our heads around economics, we have to start with how economists actually think. Basically, they use simplified models to capture a really complex reality. The statistician George Box hit the nail on the head when he famously said, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." In economics, we're basically trading a little bit of perfect real-world accuracy for a model that's actually tractable and useful for explaining broad trends. And you know what the ultimate test of whether you actually grasp these models is? It's what's called the mom test. If you can go home at Thanksgiving and intuitively explain these core concepts to your mom or your dad without needing a giant whiteboard full of equations, then you've truly mastered the material. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to start with the science of scarcity. Then we'll explore supply and demand, test our theories with a pretty wild eBay kidney dilemma, and finally, look at how we choose an overall economic system. All right, part one, the science of scarcity. So if there is one core concept that drives absolutely all of microeconomics, it's scarcity. We're studying how individuals and firms make decisions in a world where resources are strictly limited. And because resources are limited, every single action you take comes with a trade-off. Think about it. If you drop your cash on a new shirt, well, the trade-off is that you literally cannot use that same money to buy pants. Or if you choose to stay home and binge-watch TV, you're giving up the money you could have earned if you were out working a shift. You're constantly making these trade-offs to make yourself as well off as possible given your specific constraints. And that brings us to a really fundamental definition, opportunity cost. Simply put, it's the cost of any action, or even inaction, measured by the next best alternative that you gave up. This is exactly why economics is famously nicknamed the dismal science. Our whole point is that nothing, absolutely nothing, is truly free. Every single time you do something, you are passing up the opportunity to do something else. Now, I know calling it a dismal science might sound a bit depressing, but a way cooler way to look at it is that it's really just applied engineering. Take MIT's famous 2.07 engineering contest. Students are given a very limited set of materials, and they have to build a robot that pushes ping pong balls off a table. That is a textbook constrained optimization exercise. Well, microeconomics is the exact same thing. It is constrained optimization, but instead of building ping pong robots, we're using these principles to understand how people build their lives, how businesses operate, and really what drives our entire economy. Moving right along to part two, supply, demand, and diamonds. To understand how individuals interact out there in the market, we have to look back to the father of economics himself, Adam Smith. In his 1776 classic book, The Wealth of Nations, he posed this brilliant, kind of mind-bending question. Why is water practically free while diamonds are incredibly expensive? Just think about that for a second. Nothing is more essential for life than water. It is literally the building block of life. A diamond, on the other hand, it's a totally frivolous rock. It's completely irrelevant to leading a healthy, productive life. Yet the essential liquid costs next to nothing, and the frivolous rock costs an absolute fortune. How is that even possible? Well, the answer lies in looking at both sides of the market. It's what Smith called the supply and demand scissors. It's true that our demand for water is astronomically high, but you have to match that up with the supply. The supply of water on Earth is practically infinite for our daily needs. Conversely, the supply of diamonds is strictly limited. So you can't just look at how much people want a good, you have to combine it with how much is actually available out there. And this brilliantly illustrates how these forces pull in completely opposite directions. The demand curve is downward sloping, meaning as the price of something goes up, consumers naturally want less of it. The supply curve, however, is upward sloping. As the price goes up, firms can make more money, so they obviously want to produce more of it. Consumers and producers are reacting to the exact same price, but in completely inverse ways. Let's ground this with a practical, everyday example, like a market for roses. If we put both of those curves into the same space, they're eventually going to cross. That exact point of intersection is called the market equilibrium. Let's say it happens at $3 per rose with 600 roses produced. This is basically a magical spot. It's the point where both consumers and producers are completely 100% happy to make a transaction. Consumers are willing to buy exactly 600 roses at $3, and producers are willing to supply exactly 600 roses for that same $3. That is Adam Smith's invisible hand right there at work. Which brings us to part 3, the eBay kidney dilemma. Now, what's really interesting here is when we take that tidy, perfect market model and we pressure test it against a highly controversial real-world scenario. A while back, during the early Wild West days of eBay, someone actually decided to put their spare kidney up for auction. They figured, hey, I have 2, I only need 1 to live, and someone out there desperately needs it. The bidding started at $25,000, but within days, driven by desperate buyers, the price skyrocketed to $5 million before eBay finally stepped in and shut the whole thing down. This totally wild story perfectly highlights a crucial distinction in economics: positive versus normative analysis. Positive analysis is the study of the way things are. So, why did the kidney hit $5 million? Positive analysis tells us incredibly low supply plus incredibly high demand equals a massive price. But then there's normative analysis, which is the study of the way things should be. Should a person be allowed to sell their body parts to the highest bidder? A pure free market view might argue yes. A transaction happens, a life is saved, and a donor gets life-changing money. But society as a whole stepped in and said no. So, aside from morals, why do economists actually recognize that a purely free market might completely fail here? Well, we have to consider what are known as market failures. First off, fraud. On an anonymous online auction, how do you even know you're getting a healthy kidney? Second, imperfect information. Do donors truly understand the lifelong health risks involved? Third is equity and fairness. In a pure free market, only the ultra-rich would ever receive life-saving transplants. In fact, economics research, like the work done by MIT's Nikki Agarwal, specifically studies how to optimally and fairly allocate organs without just relying on who has the most wealth. And finally, behavioral economics. People might make cognitive mistakes, maybe selling a kidney for short-term cash without realizing it's completely against their long-term interests. Finally, part 4, choosing an economic system. We've been looking at individuals making choices and markets trying to find equilibrium. But now, let's zoom way out to examine how entire societies organize these principles. This leaves us with a pretty stark contrast between 2 massive economic systems. On one side, we have the capitalist economy, driven by that invisible hand. Here, individuals and firms are the decision makers. This system has historically led to tremendous wealth and economic growth, but it comes with significant issues, namely high inequality and those exact market failures we just talked about. On the other extreme, you have the command economy, like the pre-1989 Soviet Union model. Here, the government owns the resources and makes all the production and consumption decisions. They decide exactly how many shirts or cars get made. Theoretically, this was designed to ensure perfect equity, but in practice, taking away the market's natural checks and balances led to massive corruption, heavy inefficiency, and ultimately economic collapse. So what does this all mean? The crucial question we're left with is this: how do we actually define what is best for society? Is the ultimate goal maximum surplus, producing and consuming the absolute most possible goods, like a pure capitalist model aims to do? Or is the ultimate goal ensuring equity, fairness, and protecting people from those systemic market failures? Microeconomics gives us these incredibly powerful core models to analyze all of our constraints and trade-offs. But ultimately, society has to decide which values it really wants to prioritize. Definitely something to think about the next time you buy a shirt, pay a water bill, or just look at how our world is organized. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the economics around you.